It's probably no surprise that I'm definitely going to review another episode of The Owl House as part of Summerpalooza 3 in the next 2 months. But in the meantime, I'm going to be reviewing an episode centering around Luz and Kane. Even though this episode isn't one of my favorites when it comes to the first season after watching all of them, it still delivers character development between Luz and Kane. And after seeing what Kane did in the last episode I reviewed, this episode really does a major improvement of his character. Luz was about to head to Hexside, but there's an infestation of pixies going on, so school is canceled for the day. They received an invitation from Tibbers about the carnival going on at the Borean Isles. And considering that most of the antagonists from the show range from unique to really menacing, Tibbers is basically one of those unique antagonists when it comes to his strategy in order to get back against the other characters. While Edna decides to do her usual scammy business in the festival, Luz and Kane saw a friendship bracelet that is available for a lot of tickets. So they agreed to win as many tickets in order to get the friendship bracelet. But then they meet Willow and Gus, one of Luz's friends in the Borean Isles, and through the majority of the day, well, for the next hour or so, Luz spent her time with her friends and ignoring Kane. And this is the same plot that we've seen over and over again, but unlike the other plots from before, they actually did an interesting twist involving Kane's motivation in this episode. Feeling depressed after being ignored by Luz and her friends, Kane encounters Tibbers, who's wearing a fortune teller disguise, and he shows him the spray bottle that can actually shrink people, but he told him that it disappears people. So he gives it to him, and he is willing to use the spray bottle against Luz's friends, but unfortunately, he still has second thoughts. When Luz is about to find something to eat, Gus and Willow just adore Kane for being adorable, which Kane felt uncomfortable with, and he doesn't like to be treated by Luz's friends, which also causes the spray bottle to come out of his bag and spray them to shrink size. This, in my opinion, is basically the turning point of doing this cliche by adding an interesting twist. Since that Kane didn't actually shrink Gus and Willow to shrink size, he's mostly harmless, even though that he brought a bottle from Tibbers in the first place. But let me tell you on the fact that this episode, it has a really interesting setting involving Luz and Kane's relationship. It took a lot of time for Kane to get used to Luz as a friend, which is shown from episodes before this. But in this episode, since that he's mostly accustomed to Luz as a friend and not as a stranger, it really makes the relationship a lot more different compared to character relationships like Twilight and Spike. Granted, Twilight and Spike are in family while Luz and Kane aren't, but on the other hand, since that Luz is still an outcast when it comes to her strange habits, it is actually relatable to actually see her grow a relationship with Kane, especially after everything she went through at this point. When it comes to Luz's friends Gus and Willow, they're mostly the highlight in some of the episodes, but in this episode, they really don't do much other than just hanging out with Luz. And for my opinion, they're mostly plot devices for Kane's relationship with Luz, but on the other hand, they're really not that bad in this episode. I did laugh at some of the jokes in this episode, and considering that they actually become a contributing factor for what Kane can learn from them after nearly shrugging them by accident, it's always a continuation to see Kane grow a relationship with other characters who aren't from where Luz lives. And I will say that the strategy to get Luz's attention for being shrink is actually kind of unique, considering that they're mostly magicians and also trying to make those spells improve by time. And let me tell you, for the fact that we see Luz completely seeing his best friend shrunk, in the fact that she's completely disappointed, it really makes her character a lot more relatable, since that she isn't full of strangeness, if that's actually a word. And if you think that she was at her seriousness, then you should probably watch the final 2 episodes of the 4th season of this show. Because at the same time, she does have a heart and not full of weirdness. And considering that this is actually character growth for her character, it really made me appreciate her as a character. As for Edna in this episode, she gets into trouble yet again because of her scams. There's really nothing I can say about that other than that she's actually one of the best moments in this episode when it comes to her comedy. I know there's a lot involving her character as the series goes on, especially her relationship with her older sister, but in episodes like this, they're probably just saving her character development for later. And since that Edna doesn't usually appear a lot episodes from the 1st season of this show, this is basically what Kane went through in the last episode I reviewed, except that Edna is a criminal and Kane isn't really much of a criminal. I know some of you guys are probably looking forward to me to review an episode involving Edna and her sister, but as of now, it's still gonna take time for me to actually find some kind of investment in the characters. And don't correct me, I actually found investment involving Edna's relationship with her older sister. But considering that this review is mainly towards Luz and Kane, that's gonna be saved for later on. I'm not sure if I'm gonna review that episode as part of Summer Palooza 3, but if not, then afterwards, but who knows. Getting back to the plot of this episode, Luz was about to take the spray bottle away from Kane, but the cap fell off, causing the liquid to be splattered on Luz and Kane. As a result, they both shrunk, just like Willow and Gus. Tippos takes them into his tent and places them into a glass bridge where they must encounter a lot of strange, dangerous beasts. But then, after Luz and the others try to fight back, it just isn't enough. So, Kane came up with a plan by using the friend bracelet that he won and throws it at Tippos, who is distracted by the creatures he captured, which causes his spell to be undone, allowing Luz and the others, including the animals, to regain back to their normal size. All the while, Edna humiliates Tippos yet again by dumping food on him, which causes distraction from the other animals to attack him. Seriously, no matter how much Tippos instantly wants to get back at Edna, karma is always going to backfire on himself. And the episode ends with Luz finding the pieces of the friendship bracelet that Kane used, and Kane made a decision to give 2 of the other pieces to Willow and Gus. This episode is really interesting to make the 1st season of the show a lot more unique when it comes to character growth and the relationships. Let me tell you that even though that this episode is basically the character being left out because of other characters getting to the way, which I did see in other episodes in the past from other shows, but considering that this episode did an interesting twist involving that cliche, I really think that this show really knew how to get with the times and learning the mistakes from other shows and cartoons from the past. Granted, there might be some episodes that are considered bad, but at the same time, this is still the beginning, and it's gonna take a while for the writers to mess something up or completely do something unintentionally bad just for the sake of, you know, just doing a cliche, but then using that cliche badly and completely using the plot into a terrible direction that can easily make the entire episode difficult to watch. Granted, this is still the beginning of the Owl House, but on the other hand, this is still the first cartoon of the 2020s decade. And for me personally, this decade, as of now, has a good start despite with a lot of terrible things going on at the moment. Let's just hope that this decade is at least a lot more better, even if it's not going to top the last decades of cartoon animation. I give Really Small Problems a 7.25 out of 10.
Let's get this started again. Me and my whole